Hi, our guest tonight is Ashley Whitworth. She's a Wildfire Mitigation Program Coordinator with Colorado Springs Fire Department. And we're here to talk about wildfire mitigation and other subjects. So thank you for coming, Ashley, and I will turn the host over to you.
I think we had one more join too. All right, so can everybody see that? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. So first, thank you, Richard, for having me talk to you guys tonight about wildfire mitigation. So I will tell you, the city of Colorado Springs has a very well-rounded wildfire mitigation program. So I'm not too sure where everybody's coming from as far as HOAs and that go, but we'll kind of go over our program and then what you guys as homeowners can do around your property to make it more defendable if there was a wildfire event. As we go through these slides, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to just ask me as we go along. So a little bit about our program here. These are the services that we offer. So we do free on-site consultations. That's where we'll come out, walk your property with you, discuss that fire mitigation and what you can do around your house to make it more defendable if there was a fire. We have a neighborhood chipping program for areas that are in our wildland urban interface, which we will get to here in a minute. We do code and development review for new houses that are getting built in our wildland urban interface. We do the education and outreach. So that's my job title is to go out, talk to these homeowners, talk to the HOAs, attend their meetings and educate them on wildfire mitigation. We do have a fuels management program coordinator, and they are responsible for all of our large fuels mitigation projects here in the city of Colorado Springs and managing our seasonal chipping crews that we have. And then our program is heavily funded off of grants. So we are always applying for grant money to do fuels mitigation work and then keep our seasonal employees on throughout the year as well. So this is that wildland urban interface that I talked to you guys about. It runs mainly from the Air Force Academy up here all the way down to Cheyenne Mountain State Park. It is 32,655.25 acres. We work mainly west of I-25, like I said, and then a few areas that spill over east of I-25, kind of by the Palmer Park area. So this is where our program targets a big majority of our work because we have a lot of houses that back up to that forested area. So they're at a heightened wildfire risk. Within our wildland urban interface, we have 36,485 residential structures that we work with. So this is kind of like that on-site consultation, like I spoke to you guys about. It's free of charge. I will put this out there to you guys, even if you don't live in our wildland urban interface, I would still be happy to come out and do an on-site consultation for you and let you know what you can do on your property. Or, if you have an HOA and you want to do a walkthrough of your guys' common area or things like that, I would be happy to get that scheduled with you. So just some of the things that we're looking at when we walk around your house here. We're going to be looking at what is your roof material made of? Is it a wood shake roof or is it a Class A roof? We're going to be looking at your decking material. Do you have a wood deck or do you have a composite decking material? And then another thing, can we see your address from the street? Some homeowners that we meet with, we can't see their address from the street. So you really want to make sure that your address is visible. And not only if we have a wildfire, but if you guys have, an emergency at your house and you need to call 911, we need to be able to easily see your address so we can get to you as quick as possible. And then the main thing that homeowners can change and manipulate on their property is going to be the vegetation. So we'll come out, we'll talk to you about your vegetation, and then let you know what you can do to get that biggest defensible space around your property. So right now here in the city, we do have a Class A roofing ordinance. And what that is if a homeowner has a wood shake shingle roof and they have to replace more than 25% of it, they have to go to a Class A roof. And with siding as well. So were you guys all here for Waldo Canyon fire, whether you lived in the area? Okay. So after Waldo Canyon happened, we put into place some city codes and ordinances. And so this is one of them, the wood shake roof, and then the siding of the house. So any house built after Waldo Canyon has to follow all of these codes and ordinances that we're going to talk about tonight. So one of them is siding. It has to be made of ignition resistant material. And so that's going to be your fiber cement board or stucco. Your house essentially cannot be made out of wood at all now for the main structure. Let's see here. Decking material. So this is a picture from Waldo Canyon. The top one that you guys see is a deck that got burnt in the fire, and we were able to actually put it out. So now, yes, ma'am.
Just one quick question. We can see you, but not the slides.
Uh-oh.
Richard, can the camera move?
I can see the slides.
Really? So maybe, okay, maybe it's operator error. Maybe it's me.
You can like move everybody over to the side so you can see the slides. And let me ask my daughter how you do that. 1 second.
Can you
Oh,
see
wait,
the slide?
there it is. I can see it now. Never mind.
Okay.
My error. I apologize.
No, you're fine. Thank you. So as you guys see, the top picture is from Waldo Canyon fire, and you can see those kind of the joists here of where this deck caught on fire and burned. So now if you were to build a house in our wildland urban interface today, you would have to go to this bottom picture here, which is a composite, like I'm sure if you guys have heard of the Trex decking. And the large structural components of the deck can be made of wood, but the main surface area, like you guys see in this bottom picture here, has to be made of that composite material. What we learned from Waldo Canyon is that the composite decking melts in on itself versus the wood, where when it catches on fire, then it really carries. And that's what was happening in Waldo Canyon, is those decks would catch and then they would reach the house and ultimately catch the house on fire. Versus some of the composite decking, it's made of that plastic and it just melts in on itself, and it does not spread like the wood decking does. So our doors, windows, and vents. So we do recommend having a greater than 1.75 thickness for doors. The main thing that we learned from Waldo Canyon was really the attic vents. So if you guys have any vents on your house, I would highly recommend you look at them. So any of these two pictures you see here, the attic vents here, or any of the vents under your eaves, what we found out is the larger embers were getting into these areas and actually starting the house on fire from the inside. So now what homeowners have to do is they have to put 1/8 of an inch of mesh screening behind those vents. And what that does is the larger embers can't get up into the house and start the house on fire from the inside. You're going to have your smaller embers that are still able to get through that mesh screening, but they're not going to have enough heat to be able to start anything on fire. And then our overhangs and projections. So on a lot of houses, the overhangs that you guys see here is that top picture with the arrow pointing to it. Typically on your older houses, that underside is made of a wood, or sometimes it's not even covered at all. So that area does have to be enclosed, and it has to be made of an ignition resistant material. We also say do not plant any vegetation underneath these overhangs. So some homeowners, what they did is they had vegetation under their overhang, and that vegetation was catching on fire, and then it ultimately would catch that overhang on fire, and then that's what caught the house on fire. So anything with the overhangs, we recommend no vegetation underneath them at all. And then the bottom picture here, you guys can, I hope you can see there's an area right here where this wood piece caught on fire. So on some of the houses as well, that underside there was not covered by anything. Well, what homeowners do is they have wood mulch right up against the house. We would have an ember that would land in the mulch, and then it would smolder around and ultimately catch that underside of that wood on fire. And then embers would get up into the house and start the house on fire from the inside. So we would literally drive up a street, everything would look okay, and then we come back down a street, 20 minutes later, and the house is on fire from the inside. This was another reason why that was happening. So now if you build a house, that has to be covered by some type of foam or a metal flashing or stucco to cover up that exposure so embers cannot get up into the house from that way. So like I talked about earlier, the easiest thing for homeowners to manipulate or change on their property is going to be the vegetation. We get a lot of homeowners who say, Ashley, I don't want you to come out to my house. You're going to tell me to clear cut my entire property. That's not what our program is intended for. So we are not going to tell you to clear cut your property. We want to sustain the character trees, so the larger trees that are on your property. And obviously we want to maintain the aesthetics because a lot of homeowners are moving to these areas for the trees. So when we talk about vegetation, we're looking at, has anybody ever heard of ladder fuels at all? Okay, so a few people here have. So when we're looking at ladder fuels, what you guys see here is a nice big picture of a ponderosa pine, and then you have all of this vegetation that's underneath it here. So if you guys can imagine, if all of this understory vegetation catches on fire, what it's going to do is it's going to act like a ladder, and then it's going to go up the canopy of the tree, and it's going to catch the canopy of the tree on fire. So our intent is we want to reduce the ladder fuels that are under our larger, more mature pine trees, spruce trees, fir trees, whatever you have on your property, because our intent with fire is we want to keep fire on the ground and not in the crowns or the canopies of our trees. So this is a before picture. You guys see a lot of vegetation here. And let me show you, it will let me. This is an after picture. So you see where we came in, we got a lot, got rid of all of that scrub oak. And the problem too is that you get all of that vegetation growing underneath the other vegetation. Some point, something is actually going to give. Everything is competing for sun and water and the resources that it needs. So that's why we don't like to see all that vegetation in one spot, because over time, something is going to start dying off. So that's why we go in, remove all of that. You can see here, we left all the large mature pine trees and then got all of that oak, or what we call ladder fuels, out. And this is just a picture to show you guys too, when we're looking at ladder fuels. You can see how, some of these branches have drooped down, but there was some vegetation, down over here. And that's ultimately what's caught this tree on fire here. And then this is going up the canopy of the tree. This is not what we want to see. So our intent would be for the fire to kind of just skunk around on the ground. That's a lot easier for firefighters to come in, knock that fire down, versus that fire being in the canopies of our trees. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you want to take questions as we go, but is there a rule of thumb that if we're in an HOA, do we want to cut so much off the trunk so far above the ground?
So when you're doing any cutting on any of your trees, our rule of thumb is you want to keep at least 70% of the canopy of the tree. So you kind of just have to see, typically on your really large, tall pine trees, you can go about 10 to 12 feet up on them and be okay. But just make sure you're keeping at least that 70% of the canopy, or what happens is you can send that tree into shock and it could potentially end up killing that tree because we're cutting too much vegetation off of it at one time.
Is 2 feet too little, or is 2 feet at least something?
Yeah, I would recommend, not necessarily for fire, but more for the health of the trees. They do like to be trimmed up from the bottom a little bit. So even if you start with 2 or 3 feet, that's okay. And then I would recommend getting those leaves. If there's any leaves or needles or accumulation of debris under there, just try to keep that cleared out from under there. That'll actually really help the tree, and it will grow a little bit faster when that underneath is cleared out of it, of all that debris.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So when we talk about horizontal continuity here, it's the same thing. As you guys can see, we have basically one continuous line of vegetation here. So we have, some dead scrub oak that's in these, a lot of little pines here and there. So what we want to do is we want to go in and we want to break up that vegetation. So if we have a fire that starts, over here on the left-hand side, our intent is that's where we want to keep it. We don't want it to have that one continuous line of fuel to carry that fire. So this is your before picture, and then this is that after picture. So we went in, we got rid of a lot of that scrub oak that was in there that was dying, got rid of some of the pine trees, and really spaced these out. So if we do have a fire, it's going to be a lot harder for the fire to travel around in something like this versus an area where it's heavily vegetated and it has that fuel to be able to carry. Another example for you guys. So this is what I was talking about, where it's a lot easier for firefighters to come in and knock this fire down on the ground. Oh, let me go back here. Let's see, there we go. So it's a lot easier for firefighters to come in, knock this fire down. It's skunking around on the ground, but all of our pine trees are trimmed up and there's no ladder fuels on the ground. So this is kind of what we like to see. This is what we would do in a larger landscape fuels mitigation project that we do if we're looking at a big acreage project. So this is what we would do on here. These are just some other tips for you guys too. So we want to keep our gutters cleared out of leaves and needles. Same thing if you guys have window wells on your property. So just think where, all of this debris or vegetation is accumulating at. Imagine if you had a fire, if that fuel is there and an ember lands in your gutters and you have pine needles and leaves there, that's just a fuel source for a fire to start. So keep in mind, keep those areas cleared out of any of that debris. If you guys have any, pine needles, leaves, grasses, mulch on your property, you do want to keep all of that to 4 inches or less in depth. And where that comes from is, if you guys can imagine, if you have something, let's say about 3 foot tall, if you can imagine if that's on fire, what will happen is you can have about 1.5 to 3 times the height of the fuel and flame lengths. So we could have almost about 9 or 10 foot flame lengths coming off of a 3 foot tall shrub. Put into account, if we do have a fire, that fire makes its own weather. So we would have to put into account, the wind and things like that. So if you have any of those on your property, please keep them to at least 4 inches or less in depth. We talked about pruning the lower branches, keeping at least 70% of the canopy of the tree. Does anybody here have wood mulch right up against their house?
No.
No? Good. That's what I like to hear. So we do recommend, like I spoke about earlier, is this picture on the right here. We do like to see about 1 to 3 feet of rock around the house. And then anything with your mulch at least 3 feet away from the house and no more than 4 inches in depth for that.
And I thought the new standard was about 5 feet.
I will say for City of Colorado Springs, we recommend 3 feet. So if you go 5 feet, you're not hurting yourself. You're just giving yourself more defensible space if there was a fire. Yes, ma'am.
Ashley, question. For fire resistant species, is there a place to go where we could look up what those are?
Yes, so what I can do is we do have a list. So sorry if you guys can't see this. We hand out basically a folder to all of our homeowners. If you guys are interested, I can send you one, but what I'll do when I email Richard everything is there is a Colorado State Forest Service Firewise plant list that's in our packets, and I'll attach that in the email. Let me just show you guys here. Excuse me, it's Colorado State University, but it looks, I don't know if you guys can see this, sorry. But it kind of looks like this. What it does is it breaks it down into flowers, small shrubs, trees. It tells you how much sun, how much water they need, and things like that. So I'll attach that in that email too. And this is something that I would reference if you guys are going to do any mitigation work on your property, is really take a look at this and see what would be of interest to you to plant if you do any mitigation work on your property.
Thanks.
So we talked about window wells. So keep your window wells clean. I also recommend that if you guys can, try to put a cover over them, or kind of like we talked about with the attic vents and the vents around your eaves, is, or try to do a mesh screening just to keep those leaves and needles out of there, so you're not having to clear your window wells out, every week or every month. And then we also recommend not to store anything combustible under your decks. Firewood comes up a lot. We do recommend that your firewood is at least 15 feet away from your house. Right up against your house is not good. If you can imagine, if we had a fire and an ember landed there, that's just fuel for the fire to start and then get bigger and potentially catch your house on fire. So this is just a little recap here of what we recommend for a house. So the hardened structure, we talked about the Class A roof, having composite or stucco siding, having a good composite decking as well, separation of the vegetation. I do want to hit on, does anybody here have junipers on their property? Okay. So if you have ever heard our fire marshal talk, he calls junipers gasoline on a stick. So one thing I didn't hit on was if you do build a house today in our wildland urban interface, you cannot have any junipers or evergreens within 15 feet of the structure. So if you do have junipers within those 15 feet, my recommendation would be to take them out as soon as possible and replant them with a fire-resistant species. And so separation of vegetation, as you guys can see here, we have rock around the house. There's no wood mulch right up against the house. All of the trees are, pruned up nicely, and they have some separation between them. All of this, you guys, is going to give you the most defensible space and give your house the most standalone survivability in the event of a wildfire. So,
Question, what about AstroTurf? Is that flammable? And how flammable?
the AstroTurf I don't believe is, but let me do a little bit of research on that because I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So let me see what I can find on that, and then I'm gonna put my email up here, you guys. So if you want, you can email me directly, or I'll jot these questions down and I can put them all in the email to Richard and he can send them all out to you guys. Kind of whatever works the best for you. But let me do a little bit of research on that.
Thank you.
Ashley, could you put up your contact? I think there was a slide with your contact info.
Yes. So you did say, Richard, that my title was the program coordinator. That is true. We kind of, we did have somebody, my supervisor left. So right now I'm filling in for 2 positions. So program coordinator, or I'm just the acting program administrator for our program. Whatever works, but that's my current phone number and my email address as well.